can escape the Knicks. Escape, get out of town. And we bring in Ian and Bobby Marks, who's worked on this as well. All right, so Ian, we'll start with you. Where do we stand in the Knicks-Melo saga as far as him being traded?
Members of the Knicks organization still feel that the best route for them going forward is to trade Carmelo. You know, I'm told that talks with the Knicks and other teams and potentially third teams have been on and off recently, but the goal among most in that Knicks organization right now is to continue to pursue a Carmelo trade, a deal that is not easy to pull off, as Bobby can tell you.
Well, you're right, Ian. It's going to be really difficult. I think where you look at his contract right now, $26 million and $27 million owed. We haven't even talked about that 8.1 trade kicker, and I think it depends on if Carmelo Anthony wants to expand the list of teams right now. We talked about Cleveland, we talked about Houston, but Ian, I talked to three teams, and all three teams told me that if Carmelo Anthony was on the open market right now, they would not sign him to the price tag he is currently under.
So he's not basically worth the money at this point in his career. All right, so as you guys mentioned, Houston and Cleveland are the two places that Melo has basically gone on record as saying he'd be willing to go there and waive his no-trade clause. Ian, lay it out for me. How would a trade with the Rockets work?
You know, Ryan Anderson is the biggest piece for Houston, and the Knicks and the Rockets had talked about a deal involving Ryan Anderson, and as of late last week, the Knicks did not have interest in bringing Ryan back, and that's why you would probably have to bring in a third team here, a third team that would take Ryan Anderson from the Rockets, and that would allow, you know, Trevor Ariza and some of the Rockets' non-guaranteed contracts to be sent to New York for Carmelo. You know, Trevor Ariza entering the final year of his current contract, so that would open up cap space for the Knicks next summer, but they wouldn't get any significant pieces that help them now in return in that iteration of the deal.
That's what makes this whole thing so difficult for the Knicks to pull off a trade. What about, Bobby, for the Cavs? A potential trade with Cleveland, how would that have to work?
Well, we've heard the name Kevin Love, and we can probably go down that road if both sides want to. I just don't see where it's a fit for New York. If you look at how their roster is, are we willing to put Kristaps Porzingis at the 5, and now you put Kevin Love at the 4? What do you do with Joakim Noah and Willie Hernan-Gomez? And then when you look at Cleveland there, is it the LeBron James era at power forward? And I just find it difficult for both teams kind of matching up, and that's why we probably need to get a third team involved. And as you've seen, this market is drying up right now. There are not a lot of teams that are in need of a power forward. One team that might is Atlanta, but new general manager Travis Schlenk has certainly identified that team is certainly in a rebuild.
All right, so if it sounds like trades are hard to do with Carmelo Anthony and his contract, what other options would there be here, Ian?
You know, there's always the buyout option here, and that's something that the Knicks, you know, to date have been reluctant to discuss with Carmelo's people. You know, they're pretty adamant that they want to get assets back in any Carmelo Anthony transaction. They've been down the road of letting high-salary players go for nothing in the past. With Amari Stoudemire most recently, they don't want to do that again. Phil Jackson didn't want to do that again. I don't think Steve Mills wants to go that route. But they could change course. And if they did, you know, if they did agree to a buyout with Anthony, and let's say he took some less money than the $54 million he is owed, the Knicks could stretch that out across 5 seasons, and it would free up some salary cap space for the Knicks in the next 2 summers, but it would also keep a lot of money on the Knicks' books in the 3 summers after that, after they would have gotten out of Carmelo Anthony's deal had they not done the buyout.
All right, so the Knicks are right now kind of stuck a little bit with Carmelo Anthony. We'll see if there's any movement moving forward. We got Ian Begley and Bobby Marks on the story here on Coast to Coast.
Houston, the Clippers.
The one team that he would accept the buyout for is Cleveland. At this point, anywhere else seems better, right?
Carmelo should ask for a trade. I'm surprised he hasn't did it by now.
I don't think the Knicks are open to that right now. They're not willing to part with Carmelo Anthony without getting assets back.
Carmelo's a terrific player. Why would you want to finish your career on a bad team?
Carmelo Anthony's future in the Big Apple up in the air as we welcome in our Knicks reporter Ian Begley. Ian, you have an article right now on ESPN.com titled How Carmelo Anthony Escapes from New York. Break it down for us. What would need to happen for Melo to go to the Rockets?
Seems like we need to get a third team involved here because the big contract on Houston's side is Ryan Anderson. And as of late last week, the Knicks had no interest in bringing back Ryan Anderson in any potential Carmelo trades because they're looking for younger players or older players on shorter deals. So if the Knicks and Rockets could find a third team, and the one that Bobby Marks and I proposed would be the Miami Heat, if they could find a third team to send Ryan Anderson to, maybe they get a deal done, because then you have Trevor Ariza and Houston's non-guaranteed contracts coming back to New York, Carmelo going to Houston to team up with Chris Paul and James Harden. The math works there, and then the Knicks would be getting in return Trevor Ariza, who's entering the final year of his contract, and then a bunch of non-guaranteed deals. So that would open up some cap space for New York, something that they would value because they are in rebuilding mode right now.
All right, we've also reported Melo is open to waiving his no-trade clause to go to the Cavs. What's the most likely way for Cleveland to get him?
Again, I think you're looking at a three-team deal here because, as Bobby Marks points out, Kevin Love in New York isn't a perfect fit because they have Kristaps Porzingis right now at the 4. So, a perfect scenario for New York would be to create a three-team deal where Kevin Love goes to a third team. They can send Carmelo Anthony out, and then again, they open up that cap space. So maybe Atlanta would be willing to jump in here, take Kevin Love on, send one of their first-round picks to New York. That gives the Knicks a first-round pick, allows them to open up cap space for next summer. But really, none of these trades are ideal for the Knicks because they're not getting any significant assets back for Carmelo Anthony.
Ian, so what would be a third scenario for the Knicks and Melo to part ways?
Seems like the most likely scenario here, Tony, is the Knicks eventually agreeing to a buyout with Anthony using the stretch provision. As of late last week, the Knicks were not interested in entertaining buyout talks with Carmelo and Carmelo's people because they're adamant about wanting to get an asset back here in any Carmelo Anthony trade. But members of the organization feel that it's best to move on from Anthony. Anthony, as of last week, was open to moving on. So it seems like the most likely end game here is agreeing to that buyout. Again, that's tough for the Knicks because they're not getting any assets back in giving up a player that they signed to a $124 million contract a few years ago, but they would be freeing up some cap space in this scenario.
Melo has averaged at least 20 points a game in each of his 14 seasons in the NBA. We're just going to have to wait and see what indeed ends up happening. For more of Ian's story, head over to ESPN.com. In the meantime, let's send it over to you, Linda.
Thank you, Tony. For more, we welcome back our NBA analyst, Ryan Russillo, who's back with us on SportsCenter, and our front office insider, Tom Penn, who comes from us from L.A. Tom, what's the most likely scenario for Melo and the Knicks to part ways?
There's no way they can do a buyout. That makes zero sense to me. This guy is way too good a player. You can't eat that money, even if you stretch it out. There is just no way that works. They cannot buy him out. So you look at trading. I think it's Cleveland as the destination. I think Kevin Love being put into motion should turn into some sort of assets for New York. Even if they had to take Love back himself, you would rather have Love and then the ability to flip Kevin at a later date if you don't want to keep him to another club for assets. They may not solve it all at once, but I do think that you may see Carmelo Anthony in Cleveland with LeBron James, which would be wildly interesting, make the Cavs incredibly different, right, to have him in there as a scoring option with LeBron. And I could see a deal like that happening, whether it's a linear deal 1-for-1, which is easy, or if they get into a three-team deal as all the players reshuffle here in free agency.
And Tom, and the Eastern Conference more watchable. Ryan, do you agree Cleveland or Houston? Do you agree with Tom and Cleveland would be a better fit?
Well, I think it's a better fit for what Melo would want to do because you look at Cleveland and bringing in Melo, I mean, they're already the favorites in the East anyway. So when you pay attention to how this deal could go down, I've talked to so many people now about this. Melo and LeBron talk about it, okay? But the preference is for Melo to be bought out so Cleveland's not giving up any assets, not giving up a Kevin Love. So Melo is added to this group that wants to make another run at the Warriors. From a basketball standpoint, Melo's going to have more open opportunities and be somebody that would be a bigger part of the offense in Houston. But in Houston, he would really, I think, have to change who he is as a player, because there's going to be so many different looks for him where they're not going to want to stop the basketball in D'Antoni's system, a system that he actually, at one point also played in.
Let's talk about the Miami Heat. Yesterday, the Heat agreeing to re-sign Dion Waiters. Good job by Waiters to do this out and in. He got more money, a 4-year, $52 million deal. After the Heat lost out on Gordon Hayward, the Heat also lost out, as you guys know, on KD and Dwayne Wade. Remember that last year, as well as LeBron back in 2014. Tom, back to you. What's going on of late with Pat Riley and throwing the rings on a table? It's not working anymore to attract free agents to come to South Beach.
Look, it's about the peer group. All these guys want to join who their peers are, and the superstars recruit the superstars. And Pat Riley's got a pretty darn good team down there, but he doesn't have superstar status. So I think that's their main challenge. Look, things went haywire. Chris Bosh had this career-ending injury. That set things in motion. You see LeBron leave, then Dwayne Wade leaves. It's really a cautionary tale to all those that think the Warriors are here forever as constituted. You never know what's going to happen health-wise or otherwise. Pat Riley is still the boss. He's still the godfather of all NBA executives. When he talks, people listen. But that can only go so far. And when you're sitting there across from a 20-something soon-to-be centimillionaire, wherever he goes, it's not so much come join me. It's come join these other guys on the team. And while they have a great team, they don't have that stud that the other marquee player would want to run with.
You're absolutely right. I mean, this is only about who's already in place. So whenever anybody wants to move LeBron around next year, it's, okay, well, who would he be going with? And when this worked the first time, he was going to join an in-prime Dwayne Wade with another guy in his 20s. So Pat Riley deserves credit for pulling it off, but I think you could even say, like, he was the secondary piece in all of this. So I'm not going to sit here and start going, what's wrong with Pat Riley? What's wrong with most of the franchises then? Because most of the franchises can't get these guys. It's a flawed way of looking at this. It's like asking everybody that loses in the World Series of Poker what went wrong. Like, well, I lost, and then one guy won. If you asked all these fan bases, does it feel like you never get a big free agent, 90% of them in the NBA would say, man, it feels like our guy can never close a deal. Heat fans should be happy they ever closed it once. I think the expectation is they could keep doing it, and it's not going to be Whiteside and Dion Waiters and Dragic bringing in those other big names.
Great points. Welcome to the rest of the world, the Miami Heat and Pat Riley. I mean, this is what other teams have to deal with a lot.
Absolutely.
Mediocrity. Heat just 6 total games over 500 during the last 3 seasons. Gentlemen, thank you.
Here's what we got coming up on SportsCenter this hour at 11:20 a.m. Eastern. World Series champ Chris Bryant joins us live on SportsCenter. He's going to talk about it all, including how he's dealing with the ups and downs of this season so far. Then 6 minutes after that, we dive into the NFL, specifically the AFC South. Is this the season that Marcus Mariota surpasses Andrew Luck as a division's top quarterback? And at 11:36, part 2 of our E60 story of Australian surfer Mick Fanning surviving an attack from a great white shark was a tragedy avoided, but as we learned, tragedy was not something he could escape.